Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, welcome back to the MSL 411 podcast. If you've been with us before, you know our mission with this podcast is to provide free educational resources to you guys to help give a window into the MSL role and borrow and benefit from some of the knowledge that we've gained from working with MSLs for years and years now. Since the inception of Symbio, that's always been what we focused on. And we wanted to create this episode today to talk about MSL territories, geographies. What does that look like? What can you infer and learn from looking at a company's job posting and what they've said about the geography? We hope we have a good combination of experience and tips for you guys to be able to be proactive in that interview setting, and how to speak intelligently about it and intentionally about it in that interview setting. So we're going to go ahead and talk about both types of geographies, small and large, but I think it would be important to kind of just define our terms and what we mean by it. When I'm thinking small geography, I'm thinking 1 to 3 states in the territory. When I'm speaking about a large geography, I'm thinking more 10 states, a third of the country, half the country, something like that. I would say kind of middle of the road, would be like a 5-state geography. I think that's pretty common or average in that category. Maybe this person has Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, Kansas, something like that, or even like a Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. Just kind of an average geography. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we're kind of on the same train of thought there. The smaller ones make me think drivable, just a couple states. The big ones obviously are flying back and forth a lot, and then those middle of the road I think that's where maybe personal preference kind of throws it into one category or the other. But it can be that you can cover 5 states and have to fly around. If you live in the Dakotas or something like that, there may not be a KOL where you are, so you have to kind of go somewhere. And I think when aspiring MSLs especially are looking at geographies or looking at MSL positions and seeing the geography that they cover, maybe some of the things that a seasoned MSL or one of us as MSL recruiters would know just by looking at the geography, they might not be as obvious to an aspiring MSL because they've just not had that experience to get in there and say, oh, this is what it's like in a small geography, or this is what it's like in a large geography. So after you've been working with MSLs all these years, what insights could you give maybe aspiring MSLs to let them know what they can glean when looking at positions by the geography size alone?
Yeah, what they tell about the travel. Well, MSLs travel. That's the job, right? Occasionally we'll talk to people who don't want to travel, and I'm sorry to say this job is not for you. But the type of travel is going to look different depending on the size of the geography and the targets within that geography. So if somebody is trying to get as much information they can, maybe they're pre-interview, haven't had a chance to talk to anybody at the company, there's actually a lot they can find out before they even get to that interview. So when you're considering a company or a role, you're probably starting your exploration project by looking at the product, looking at the pipeline. If you've got a clinical stage company in front of you or a company with approved products, that's going to determine how they're drawing the map for the medical affairs organization. So, on a small team, new team build out with 3 people where you're covering a third of the country, you can infer from that information that you are not driving around a geography. Visiting HCPs in a little community center, you're probably going to be in a role where you're working on clinical trials. You're supporting clinical trial sites and flying to reach those sites. If you are working on an asset where you have a very small geography, 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, you may have a half state, like a Southern California. You can probably infer from that you're going to be on a team of 30, 40 people, where you're working with HCPs and smaller institutions and maybe some bigger ones too. But you can tell by the size of the geography, oftentimes, what the targets are going to be if you're working with those kind of higher level KOLs, sites, or you're maybe more entrenched in the community. So that's, right out the gate, that's the kind of key piece of information that someone could figure out just by virtue of the number of states that they have in the geography. Now, if you are really wanting to dig in and kind of do some homework to understand a little bit more about that geography in preparation for the interview, how would Linda start that process?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different ways. First, knowing whether it's a clinical stage company or one where you'd be supporting an approved product, or if you're supporting an approved product, but there's also things in the pipeline that you may be offering support for as well.
Yeah.
You probably want to start by researching that product.
Mm-hmm.
So you would go to something like clinicaltrials.gov, look at what's going on, what they're doing with this product, what phase it's in. Any information you can get from that will help you determine where you're going to be visiting. Now, are you going to be doing more clinical trial enrollment where you're speaking to HCPs on that? Or are you going to be doing more education, disease state awareness, that sort of thing based on where it is in the clinical trial phase?
Yeah.
So understanding where they are in the clinical trial phase will help you to understand where you're going to be spending a lot of your time and also what you're going to be doing when you are out in the field visiting those KOLs. So it gives you a little bit more information to go on. Another thing I would want to look up is if you're going to be working in a rare disease, checking to see where the centers of excellence are, where the comprehensive care centers are, because again, that will give you more information on whether you're going to be working with a really concentrated KOL pool or whether they're going to be spread out, whether you are covering kind of that Midwest area and you're just going to be hitting up the Cleveland Clinic and CHOP and maybe one or two others, then you kind of have a better understanding of what that travel is going to look like. If you are working with a not so rare disease, you may be dealing with a lot of community health care providers.
More local.
Yeah. So that may be more driving around. So just understanding the product that you're working with or going to be working with, and understanding a little bit about the disease state, whether it's rare, whether it's not listed under a rare disease, what KOLs you'll be dealing with there, where they're going to be concentrated. Are you going to be talking with all kinds of HCPs, or are you going to be talking to specialists in this disease state? All of those things can give you more information about what the travel is going to look like, what covering this geography is going to look like for you. And as an aside, what hiring manager doesn't love an interviewee coming in and saying, so I've looked up all of the clinical trial data on your product, and it looks like you are visiting KOLs likely in this center. Is that going to be important for me to visit there? And what other centers of excellence are you looking at? Because I've identified these two already. So it just shows that you're invested and that you've done the research and you're excited and you're already kind of formulating your plan for how you're going to attack this geography. And if you have some connections at those sites, that's even, it's just a little icing on the cake.
More bonus. Yeah. Well, and something I was thinking about as you were speaking too is, those times where we've worked with a client where they haven't given us a geography too, like they haven't drawn the map. They've said, we are going to be hiring 5 MSLs and we're just looking for good people that are well connected, and we can flex on what the geography may be, which is ambiguous, but if you find yourself in that situation, you can get that data and see, okay, well, the comprehensive care centers are here, here, and here. So I can have a general idea of me, a person living in Ohio, is probably going to have this, and this center within however they cut the territory map. So there's a lot of information that you can just kind of gather or infer just with a little bit of homework. And I mean, one of our clients just got their approval in Niemann-Pick disease. Yay! Exciting. And so using them as an example, if you go to the NORD website, National Organization of Rare Diseases, it shows you the link for the National Niemann-Pick Disease Foundation. And you get on there and you go to the family support section of the website, takes you to ASMD comprehensive care centers and NPC comprehensive care centers, US. And this is, for patients, but we're using this for our research too. It's very helpful. And it's a super quick way to find out, what the top treaters are for this patient population. And as I'm looking at it here, you're now figuring out the range of specialists with expertise in managing that patient population. So even though the job description may say, hey, we want metabolic experience, we want rare disease experience, you get on here and you see the Mayo Clinic, for example, lists that specialists with expertise in managing these patients. NPC patients are pediatric gastroenterologists, pediatric hematologists, pediatric neuro, of course, but also pediatric pulmonologists, registered dietitians, and then, a whole host of adult providers as well. And, their job description said, hey, we're really looking for this and this, but you walk into that interview and say, I have this and this experience, but I also, from this other thing I did, have some contacts in the pediatric gastroenterology space. And you have so much more to bring to the table because you understand kind of the scope of all the different people that you could potentially touch when working in this space. So it's this fairly quick research project you've done, but you've taken the initiative to learn more about what the centers are in the geography, what sort of specialists you're going to be engaging with in your role, So, you're coming to the table prepared, and you have changed the trajectory of your interview because you have done all this background research.
Yeah, and I think it really does. I mean, it's such an easy thing to do to look this up, right? And it gives you so much information. So you walk into the interview and you say to the hiring manager, "Hey, I know that these patients have speech and language problems. Is there any benefit to reaching out to SLPs for this?" And the hiring manager might think, actually, that's a great idea. Like, thank you for putting forth the initiative to look into that. Or they may say, no, not really, but that's really putting some creative thought into it. And it's interesting that you came up with that.
Yeah.
So it might do you well to just look at that and be formulating your questions to ask the hiring manager during the interview, or just to kind of form your frame of thought of what kind, like you said, what kind of providers you're going to be dealing with or might run into. So it's such an easy thing to do to give you a leg up and make you look like you've done a ton of research.
Yes. I'm thinking of a candidate right now. Her company had an asset in Wilson's disease, and she had a nutrition background. And she was the only person on the team that had this kind of a background. It's a little less common in industry, I'd say. And because Wilson's disease is a copper deficiency, diet obviously plays a huge role in these patients. And she has this unique skill that she's bringing to the table, being able to kind of speak the language with some of the providers as they talk about what they need to do with their patients. This is like a whole angle that you're presenting to the hiring manager they may not have even thought, just because of, just really sitting down and thinking about what is the scope of what's needed for this patient population. And so,
and I think in that example, it's so great that you had somebody with that background in there, because she could, like you said, kind of speak that language that maybe nobody else on the team had, but also it probably set off an alarm in the hiring manager's mind that, hey, this is a new angle that nobody has thought of, because nobody has this background. So I have to have this person on my team to cover this angle. It has to happen.
We need her.
Yes. So it makes you invaluable. It's such a great selling point for yourself, I think. So
absolutely. Great things to think about, kind of pivoting back to bigger geographies versus smaller geographies. What are those things beyond what we've talked about here? What are some other things that people may not, especially aspiring MSLs, may not consider when they look online and they see a big geography or a small geography? What are some of kind of the hidden benefits of each that people may not necessarily think about?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think just after working with MSLs so long, we kind of have the gist of what some of those benefits are. First of all, let's talk about big geographies. Not always, but usually big geography signifies that you're with a smaller company, or at least a smaller team. So if you're one of 4 MSLs on this team and it's a smaller company or just a new team, you're going to have more visibility within the company. So and that's what a lot of people really look for. They want something where they're visible. They're not a cog in a wheel where nobody pats them on the back when they do something great, or they don't get the opportunities to jump on board in projects or come up with their own ideas for projects. So if you're in a bigger geography, chances are you're going to have that high visibility within the company. You're going to have probably more opportunity to take on projects or come up with your own projects. And so I think that's a huge asset for a big geography. A lot of times with a big geography, your KOL pool is more spread out. So that could mean that you're doing more virtual meetings. You're doing the in-person, of course, but kind of piggybacking off of the in-person meetings with more virtual meetings, just to make sure you're touching base with those KOLs that are flying distance away, not necessarily drivable.
Or conferences.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing about those KOL meetings, if you are flying in to meet them, chances are that KOL is going to be a little bit more invested in that meeting, knowing that you are getting on a plane, flying in, staying in a hotel overnight, just to have that conversation with them. So chances are they'll take it a little bit more seriously, knowing that you're actually making such an effort to get there just to see them. So that's another little hidden gem. I think that also looking at the geography size kind of tells you a little bit about pieces of the compensation package as well. So big geography, chances are they're not going to be providing you with a fleet car. Maybe it's more of a car allowance. And I know some people really love the car allowance because they get to drive their own car, and it's kind of in their minds rolled into their compensation a little bit more. So a lot of people consider that as a plus. Now, of course, with small geographies, there are benefits there too. It's potentially you're covering fewer states, so it's more drivable, potentially less overnights where you'd have to stay in a hotel, that sort of thing, because it is drivable. It is something where you can get home at the end of the day, which I know for MSLs who have families, small kids at home, anything like that, being home at night is very important. And so a lot of folks look for small geographies specifically for that reason. Also, you are potentially working with a variety of providers. Your KOL pool is more concentrated. So instead of just looking at this one specialized type of provider, maybe you're looking at immunologists and people who deal with rheumatology diseases and dermatology. Maybe you're kind of looking at all of those folks instead of just focusing on dermatologists or whatever the disease state may be. So you could just be working with a lot of different types of providers. You could be getting exposure to a lot of different therapeutic areas because of that. And so some people like to gain that experience. And I think that the KOL pool being more concentrated, like I was just saying, may mean you're getting more of those face-to-face interactions, which sometimes people feel is a better way to build those strong, lasting relationships, a little bit easier than through a computer screen. So you're getting the chance to really see your KOLs face-to-face, and they know you, they know your face, you shake their hand. It's that physical interaction that you're probably getting a little bit more of. So, I mean, those are just a few that are top of my mind of what is great about big geographies and also what's great about small. There's nothing wrong with either. Everybody has their preference, but
in different life stages, different things are important to you too. I hear from people that they have more flexibility. They like to travel. They want to get out there. And then, there's also other little benefits that, you talk to an MSL up in New York who really likes getting down to, covers the whole East Coast, loves getting down to Florida for those KOL visits during the winter. Or, on the flip side, they may say, "Ooh, I don't like having a geography where I have to fly because weather-related issues pop up for me a lot, and that doesn't work for my family life. That really derails our whole situation." There's all kinds of different factors, but you do get to enjoy a lot of benefits too. If you have a geography that puts you in a situation like that where you're getting to visit Florida more than you have, or we have a couple of MSLs too that like, I have a home here and here, and so I can cover both, and I have a home base to go to, so
or cover Hawaii as part of their geography. How nice for you.
Not going there every month, but
No.
those conferences sound quite nice.
Yeah.
Really good content, really good information to pass along, and some things that hopefully you guys haven't considered before, but will consider now, and will be able to walk into your interview better prepared, just by taking a little time to look and read between the lines on that job description. So hope this has been helpful for you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.